All right, our next speaker will be Ian Jones. He's a mighty fine speaker. We've had him at Bogue, Chitto, held a meeting for us and done a great job. And we're so thankful to have him with us today. Ian, he's married to his wife Tanya. They have 3 children. The name is Van, Kennedy, and Olivia. He's been doing evangelist work for 12 years. He go to Somerville Church of Christ. Somerville Street Church of Christ. I'll turn it over to him right now.
Good morning. It's really good to be here today. I have to give you fair warning. Ralph told me that I could talk as long as I wanted since we're going in lunch break, so this could be a long one. I appreciate Jameson saying it didn't matter whether we wear a tie, since I was the one guy that didn't wear a tie or a jacket. I probably would have worn a jacket though, had I known it was so cold in here. But I hope that you're comfortable. Maybe the cold will help keep you alert and awake. As we talk this morning about where happiness is not found, because it's not really my job or Jameson's job to tell you where happiness is. That's the job of the other 2 speakers today. But today I was given the topic of drugs, alcohol, and etc. So that was somewhat ambiguous. And so we're going to veer off into the etc. just a little bit, but our main focus will be on drugs and alcohol this morning. I've entitled the talk this morning, Filling Our Cup. And that'll make more sense to you as we get a little bit later into our talk. But I want to start this morning by doing a case study. So I want you to all think with me for just a minute. This is child A, and just for our purposes, we're just going to call her Amber. Amber lives in a home that is filled with blessings. Her parents provide for every one of her needs. They love her, and they reassure her that every single day. At night time, when she goes to bed, her parents come in, they pray with her. They tuck her into bed, they read her a bedtime story. In the morning, mother comes in and fixes her breakfast. She has more clothes than she can ever wear. She lives in a nice home. I'm about to make a mess. The point is, she has a very wonderful home life, and her cup is filled with blessings. That's the kind of home that she lived in, that she was raised in. Now I want to talk with you for a minute about child B, and we'll just call her Brittany. Brittany's parents fight all the time. They can't agree about money. They can't agree about raising their child. Anytime Brittany does something wrong, her parents yell at her. They call her stupid. They tell her they wish she would never been born, how she's an inconvenience to their life. Brittany goes to school and she isolates herself because she really feels inferior to everyone around her. She has a very difficult time making friends. When she gets into school, she can't hardly keep her grades up. When she goes to bed at night, she can't sleep soundly because she's worried about the fear of what might happen within her home. And Brittany has a cup of pain. Now I want to ask you a question. Out of Amber and Brittany, which one of these 2 would you think would grow up and be an addict? Who thinks child A will grow up and be an addict? Go ahead and raise your hand. Who thinks child B might grow up and be an addict? What if I told you you're wrong? See, that's the way we look at it. We look at people that grow up and they have addictions and they have substance problems, and we go, that person must have had a terrible upbringing. And sometimes that's true. People grow up and they have a cup of pain and they want that pain to go away. And so they immerse themselves in some type of substance abuse. But the truth is, some people grow up in a home like Amber. And their parents gave them everything that they ever could have wanted. That's part of the problem. And so they go through life thinking that happiness is really the result of the next thing that you can experience in your life. And maybe Brittany grows up to be an outstanding person. It's hard to tell. You know, this has puzzled people, and the NIDA, which is the National Institute for Drug Abuse, has spent hours upon hours doing research, spending money, interviewing addicts, former addicts, trying to figure out what is it that makes a person drawn toward alcoholism or toward drug abuse. You know what's interesting? Out of all of that time and effort and energy and resources that they put into it, here's the answer they came up with. Most people started using drugs because they were bored. They were bored. That shocked me. That just blew my mind. They were bored. They were bored with life. And the truth is, what happened was they never really understood the meaning of life. They had no purpose in life. They never were going toward anything. They just simply were just going through life. From Luke chapter 8 and verse 14, this is a parallel to one of the verses that Jameson read from the parable of the sower. Here Luke records, "And that which fell among thorns are they which when they have heard go forth and are choked with cares and riches and pleasures of this life and bring no fruit to perfection." This word pleasures is a very interesting word. It's the Greek word hedone, which is where we get our word hedonism. So when Jesus uses this word, the word just means a sensual delight or a pleasure. Now, Greek philosophers sat around and they talked about how happiness would be attained. And as they sat there and they reasoned with each other, they came up with different ideas. And one of Socrates' pupils, one of his little chicken pecking to death apprentices, I guess, if we're going to use Jameson's language, his name was, I probably will mispronounce this, Aristippus, and that's probably terrible. But this guy came up with this idea that we now know as hedonism. And this is the school of thought that one can find sustainable happiness, that is long-lasting happiness, through maximizing what is called net pleasure. Now here's what net pleasure is. That means if I can maximize the amount of pleasure that I experience in my life, I can minimize the amount of pain and displeasure. So, we'll just call this one with the big stripe, the cup of pleasure. So here's the way to happiness through the hedonist view. I'm going to go jump out of an airplane. Many of you don't look like you want to do that. That's what a lot of people feel like is a thrill. What gets your motor running? Well, maybe it's not jumping out of an airplane. Maybe it's going to every college football game. We like to do that, right? Well, maybe it's nothing like that. Maybe I'm just going to go and I'm going to go buy me a new car. Well, the new car's kind of getting, I need another new car. A little faster, a little nicer. Maybe I need to worry about accomplishment. If I can just get to where I want to be in my career. Maybe I think I'll just go have a beer. Maybe I have another. I'll just go on vacations. That's what I'll do. And their theory is if you can just keep pouring and keep pouring, eventually you can't pour anymore, and you're happy. The problem is what this focuses on is every individual experience that you have in life. And so for this really to work, that means that every experience has to lead me toward that ultimate goal of happiness.
Well, let me ask you, who here today, just go ahead, raise your hand if every experience you've had in life has been good. Every experience you have in life from day to day is exciting. What they're really talking about is something that naturally happens, and that's this. Everybody's body has what's called dopamine, and dopamine is something that triggers something within our brain when we experience pleasure, and it tells us that it's pleasurable. It's that adrenaline rush that you get. It's that high that people get when they take drugs. It's that feeling of euphoria that a person gets when they take up a needle and shoot heroin into their vein. It gives them a sense of pleasure. And why do people do that? Because they want to be happy. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. Why would somebody do that to want to be happy? Because they bought into this philosophy. If I can maximize the amount of pleasure in my life, I can minimize the amount of displeasure in my life, and I'll be happy. Romans chapter 8 and verse 5 talks about this very thing, not in the idea of hedonism, but he says, for those which live, or who live according to the flesh, set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. To be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. You know why some people grow up like little Amber and they become an addict? Because what their parents forgot to teach her was that happiness is not found in stuff. Happiness is not found in the physical experiences. And so she may grow up in a home where everything is provided for her, and anytime she asks for something, her parents go and they purchase it for her, and she gets out in life and she's got all these expectations, and maybe they've driven her toward one goal all of her life, and let's just say it was a professional tennis player. And so she goes and tries her hand at that. And since she was a little girl, she was going to be a professional tennis player. And she finally gets to the point where she's going to be a professional tennis player, and she tears her ACL and her career is over. What now? That's the reality. They bottled up happiness inside of this cup and said, here it is, honey. Fill your cup. Go fill your cup. And at some point, what she was pouring in that cup can't be poured in there anymore, and her cup is empty. So, pour what now? That's the allure. And I'm going to tell you something about drugs. Drugs, in a lot of ways, can give you the hedonistic type of happiness. They can do it. It's brief, it's temporary, but it can maximize pleasure in the moment. And the reason that people are drawn to that is because that's where they've set their mind. They think that everything is about the physical. Revisiting Philippians chapter 3 and verse 19 that Jameson read to us just a moment ago, he said about those enemies of Christ whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly. Now, if I asked you today what you thought the most popular religion in the world was today, what would we think? Maybe Catholicism or Islam is catching. You know what I would say it is? Hedonism. That's the most popular religion in the world today. It's where we serve ourselves. We're our own God. And the way to happiness is for me to serve me and to do what I like. You know, that's become a very popular adage today. Do what makes you happy. That might as well be the hedonism motto. Do what makes you happy. If you like to go out to the bar, and you like to drink and dance, or you like to go to Bonnaroo, I'll tell you, that's a hedonism festival. Where everybody gets together and they immerse themselves in pleasure and music and drugs and sex. That's what it is. It's a modern day Woodstock. You know why people go there? To fill up their cup. That's why they go there. In Luke chapter 12 and verse 19, as Jesus talked about the man that we call the rich fool, This man had a bumper crop and got to the point where he didn't have the barns to contain the goods that he had. And he said to himself, he said, I will say to my soul, we wouldn't do that, would we? But that's what this man, he was very self-absorbed. I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. You know what we did? We made it into wall decor. Not me personally, but this was at a store where you can buy wall decor. Eat, drink, and be merry. Well, we don't really buy into that, do we? Sure we do. That's the American dream. We want to work and add and get to a point where we don't have to do anything. We'll just take our ease. We'll just kick back, take our shoes off, eat whatever we want, drink whatever we want, and be what? Be happy. Be merry. You know, there was a man who had every resource. Every resource and every opportunity that you could possibly imagine to seek happiness through pleasure. And this man, like the young rich fool, said to his heart, come now. I want you to just let that sit in for a minute. This man said to his heart, come now. I will test you with myrrh. Come now. Maybe it's shocking to you to look out and see some people get involved in drugs. But you know why most people get involved in drugs? This right here. Because most people aren't intentional with life. They're just looking for different ways to make themselves happy. And so they just start testing their heart. And it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But they're just curious to see whether that will give them the feeling that they are longing for. That experience of pleasure. As Jameson mentioned a moment ago from Hebrews chapter 11, I want to notice something that he didn't necessarily pull out of the text, but I want to revisit just for a moment this thought of who Moses was growing up. He was a man that lived in a house of royalty. Now, I will tell you that around royalty, hedonism was just a thing that was just connected with royalty. They could sit around and do nothing while other people served them all day, and they could have any pleasure they wanted. Moses certainly could have had that, but I want to notice that the Holy Spirit uses these words that he chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Here's what we do. We say, well, that cup of pleasure, it's really not a cup of pleasure. Those people that are out there committing sin, they're not having fun. They're not really enjoying themselves. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And you may not like me saying that, but here's the reality. People that are out doing those things, they are enjoying themselves. That's the reason they keep doing it. Because whether we want to admit it or not, there is pleasure in sin. There is enjoyment in sin. One of the problems is, though, it's for a season. It's not lasting. And it doesn't fill the cup up. It's not happiness. And that's a huge disconnect that we have as people a lot of times, is not understanding that fun is not happiness. It's not the same thing. You know, the world, they know that sin is fun. In fact, just in the last few years, Corona taught us if we drink their beer, it's like having a vacation on the beach. And if you drink Dos Equis, you'll be the most interesting man in the world. Beer makes you interesting. Well, I don't disagree with that. It will make you interesting. I don't know what fitness has to do with beer, but Michelob Ultra decided to say, live fit, live fun, live ultra, I guess because their beer has less calories. But notice the phrase, live fun. That's the connection they want us to make, that it's enjoyable, it's fun, and I'll tell you, for a lot of people it is. It is, they enjoy it. And I'll tell you what's really catching wind in my part of the world right now is we're not hearing a lot about alcohol right now, but I'm hearing a whole lot about the use of marijuana. And right now there's a campaign to legalize marijuana in Texas. Now, it's not catching a lot of wind, but as you see in other states, it's probably not long off. And here's the idea of their marketing. Number one, it is safer than alcohol. Now, if I set down a jug of bleach today and a jug of muriatic acid and said, which one would you like to drink? What would you say? Neither one. Those are dangerous. Those are poison. Well, what if I said, yeah, but bleach is much safer than muriatic acid, so you should drink the bleach? Well, you'd say, well, they're still not safe, and that's the point. Is marijuana safer than alcohol? Well, maybe in some ways, but it's not safe. Just because it's safer than something that's already poison doesn't mean that it's safe. Yeah, but marijuana makes you happy. It might. For a minute or two. For a little while. We'll have more to say about that in a minute. Yeah, but you can't overdose on marijuana. You know, I can't overdose on food either. Can I? You know, there's a lot of these arguments that are just meant to be a distraction, a deflection from the reality. And I want to show you the reality. People say that marijuana is not addictive, and its only side effects are hunger, sleep, and dry mouth. I suppose there's a reason why Lindell or Ralph or whoever asked me to do this talk, because I visited with them when I was out here last time, and they know that I used to be an addict. And I'll tell you something about this particular propaganda. I used to be addicted to marijuana. You say, that's not true. You can't be addicted. Yes, you can. You can absolutely be addicted. You say, well, yeah, in a psychological way, you can be addicted, but not in a physical way. You can be addicted in a physical way as well. Now, what people are saying is it's not like heroin or cocaine or crack or meth. You know, when you quit doing it, you're not going to go through these severe symptoms of withdrawal where you get sick and you nearly die. Well, no, that's not the case. But I will tell you, you can be very much addicted to marijuana. And here's the facts about marijuana. Number one, it's not safe. Marijuana has been linked to emphysema and lung cancer and is a lot more harsh smoke than even cigarettes. Marijuana brings about paranoia and delusions. I've experienced this one. You'll think everybody's out to get you. You will think things are happening that aren't happening, and I will tell you, your imagination will run wild, and you'll believe that lies are actually true. That's the reality. They have linked cognitive development at being slowed to a rate where if someone starts smoking marijuana at a young age, like 12 or 13 years old, that they will not mature in their mind from that point on. That there's a lot of things about their mental abilities that just do not develop during those teenage years because it stunts that development that happens. Prolonged use can even increase the risk for schizophrenia, especially among adolescents. If you start smoking marijuana at a young age, you're increasing your risk for being schizophrenic when you grow up and get older. It actually increases depression while children, I say teenagers, were smoking marijuana because of their boredom and because they were wanting to have fun. It was actually showing that those that were smoking were actually more depressed after they were smoking. It wasn't making them happy. It wasn't giving them the feelings that they wanted. Oh, it was fine while they were high, when they were with their friends, but along with that, later on, it was really having a negative effect upon their emotional side. It decreases the ability to focus. A lot of people that smoke marijuana on a regular basis, what we're seeing in Colorado, where it's legal now, is a lot of people can't hold down a job now. They can't perform at work. They've lost their motivation to go to work. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the individual. It's not a good thing for society. It doesn't make us better as a society. It's not making us happy. Now, understand something. It's not my job to say whether or not having a drink of alcohol is right or wrong. That's an idea for another topic. It's not my job to say that whether or not marijuana actually has some medical uses. I believe that it does. But that's really not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is people thinking that they can find happiness by filling the cup of pleasure. And I'll tell you, friends, it will not do what you want it to do. I sat through many a drug seminar. They had somebody come out every year, to even Allison, Texas. I graduated a class of 5 people. We had a little bitty school, but every year they had somebody come out and do an anti-drug seminar. And I listened to these people who had done drugs tell me, don't do drugs. And they told me all the bad things that happened. You know what I did? I went and did drugs. Well, that's dumb, isn't it? Well, yeah, it's dumb. But you know, that's how people are. That's just how people are. Solomon says, better is in the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. You know, sometimes curiosity gets the better of us. And rather than just think about what we can see, we wonder about what might be. What might be. I want you to think about a man from Scripture just for a moment. And I don't have the verses on the board. But over in 2 Samuel chapter 13, the Bible tells us about David, King David's oldest son, Amnon. Amnon fell in love with his half-sister Tamar. And the Bible says that he loved her so much, he longed after her, he desired her so much, it made him physically sick. That's how much he wanted her. And so he and his first cousin get together and they plot this plan to pretend that he's sick and have her come into his room to serve him and help nurse him back to health. And when she comes in the room, he forces her, he rapes her, and then the Bible says that he hated her. That he hated her more than he loved her. Now, I would dare say none of us have probably been there, right? But I'll tell you, we have been in this way. We've seen something that we desired. We wanted to know what the experience was like, and so we did everything within our power to get that experience. And once we got it, we hated it. Because it really wasn't what we thought it was going to be like. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 23 says, to do evil is like sport to the fool. It's a game. Life's just a big game. And if I want to go out and I want to have some fun and I want to go out and drink with my buddies, that's none of your business and I'll do what I want. We're just having fun. And sometimes it is. It's like a game. It's like hot potato. You ever played hot potato? I don't mean where you throw around the softball. I mean where you get a hot potato and you throw it to each other. You can't hold on to it very long. Your hands will get burned. But we're not worried about anybody getting hurt playing hot potato. But I'll tell you really what it's more like is Russian roulette. Where you've got 6 people in a circle and 5 bullets in the chamber. And maybe one person doesn't get hurt, but everybody else gets really hurt. Sin is not a game. And sin is not a means to happiness. Titus chapter 3 and verse 3 says, for we ourselves were also once foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving various lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. You know, one thing I learned by being an addict was being around other addicts. This was just the natural tendency of addicts. To hate everyone around you. You know why? Because you won't support my addiction. Because it's not an addiction, it's a God. You say, well, I thought we were going to talk about drugs and alcohol and how that leads us toward happiness. Well, here's the reality about drugs and alcohol. You're not going to take a drink and feel euphoria. You're not going to have a beer and maximize pleasure. It leads toward addiction. And addiction's ugly. Addiction is where I don't care about you anymore. I don't care about my family. I care about one thing and one thing alone. That's making me happy. And if I have to hurt you to do that, that's fine. I'll steal from you for my addiction. I will lie to you for my addiction. I will hurt you for my addiction. It breeds hatred. Proverbs 23:21 says, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe the man with rags. And I want to echo something Jameson said. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he has. But I'll tell you, the tragedy is when people are in addiction, they have nothing. That's not their problem. Their problem is not they have too much stuff. They have nothing. My mother has been addicted to prescription pills since I was a kid. And I thank God she has been clean for 2.5 years. First time in my life. She's been clean for 2.5 years. And I'll tell you, when she came out of that addiction, you know what she had? Nothing. She lost everything. And I think some of that stuff was important to her, at least it was important once she realized she didn't have it. A lot of the pictures she had of us when we were kids, stuff that her dad had given her before he passed away, was gone. She didn't know what happened to it. That's just that lifestyle. And I'll tell you, on the other side of this, I can talk with her now and ask her, why did you do that? You know why she did it? Because she didn't want to feel. That's why she did it. She thought that'd make her happy. She had a lot of regret in life, a lot of guilt built up in life, and she didn't want to feel it. She didn't want to experience that. And so she felt like if she took these pills every day, that it would decrease the amount of pain that she felt within herself, and it would make her happy. It didn't make her happy. I'll tell you, you're going to see all these advertisements on television. You're going to hear propaganda. But I'll tell you, if they were really true, what we would see is the reality. The real ugly face of addiction. Solomon says in Proverbs 23 and verse 29, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Well, that doesn't sound like happiness, does it? Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? And then he answers this question by saying, those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. You know, the Jews, they had their wine was very diluted compared to what we have now, what you would go buy in a store. The alcohol content was rather low. You could still get drunk off of it, but it would take a whole lot. They would actually take herbs and other substances, though, and they would mix it in this wine to make it stronger and stronger. And it would be more closely related to what we would call a narcotic. Something very strong. Why'd they do that? I'm sure for the same reasons people today do it. They're bored. They're unhappy. They want to feel different than they feel now. But what do they get out of it? You know, the thing about alcohol is it changes a person. I've got a brother that's 10 years older than me, and he's also been an addict, still is to this day. And I will tell you, when my brother is sober, and he's been sober for a while, he's a very charming person. He's fun to be around. When he's drunk, he is mean. And he says some very terrible things toward people that love him. He's gone through 2 divorces, both because of his alcoholism. He has 4 children. He does not have a relationship with those children other than he calls them about once or twice a year. I don't know where he's at today. I have no clue. But I'll tell you what his life has been. It's been a life of chaos. And if you tell him about his alcoholism and you tell him about his pill addiction, to this day he will defend it, saying he's not an alcoholic and that he needs his pills. He is constantly fighting with people. He can't get along with one single person. He has a cycle in his life. He will destroy every relationship that he has, and he'll disappear for about a year, and he'll come back into people's lives, and then he'll destroy his relationships again. And I'm not trying to villainize him or say that he's an evil person. I'm just telling you that that's not my brother. That is my brother on drugs. It changes a person. When he's sober, his intentions are good. His thoughts are in line. But in his addiction, he's a man of trouble. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smooth. You ever seen somebody squeeze out a glass of beer on tap and set it down and the foam sits on top of it in this nice, shiny, pretty glass? It's desirable. It may not be desirable to you, but to a person that likes that sort of thing, it's nice. It's in a pretty little package. You know, sin is just that way. It's deceitful. It was that way in the Garden of Eden. When she saw that the tree was good for food, it was pleasant to the eye. She saw it, it looked good. Did it make her happy? Proverbs 23:32, at the last it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. I can't tell you the number of people that have looked me in the face and said, Ian, you cannot tell me that drinking a couple of beers is sinful. You can't prove that to me. Well, I can't prove to you that picking up a snake is sinful, but if you pick up a snake and it bites you, don't be surprised. Just because it's not sinful to have a beer or two doesn't mean that it's wise or that it won't hurt. You know, the thing is, people that are living in addiction live in delusion. Your eyes shall see strange things, your heart will utter perverse things. If you're around somebody that is not sober, they will actually say things to you you couldn't imagine that person ever saying. And they won't even believe you that they said it when they sober up. I would never say something like that. Well, they might not. But you're not in control. You've given that control to whatever you put in your body. He says, yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of a mast. Now, when I was a senior in high school, we all went to Hawaii for our senior trip. You can do that when you got a class of 5. And we had a really good time on that trip. But some of my classmates, and I actually wasn't involved in it this time, we had a deep sea fishing trip set to go early on one morning. And they all went down to the convenience store. They all bought fake IDs, and they went down to the convenience store and they bought a bunch of alcohol. And so the night before they went deep sea fishing, they were drunk. Well, guess who fished that day? Not them. They had a vomiting festival. They were sick all day long. You know what they were trying to do? Have a good time. Enjoy the experience. Now I'll tell you, all this stuff we're talking about right here in this chapter, it's not a shock to you, is it? But I'll tell you what shocks me. This verse right here. They have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake, that I may seek another drink? The man who has woe, the man who has sorrow, the man who sees strange things, who fights with people, who gets beaten when he's drunk, wakes up the next day and says, let's have another. Does that puzzle you? It's puzzling, isn't it? I want to introduce you to something now. This is called the hedonic treadmill. And the hedonic treadmill is this. When someone sees something and they want something, they will buy it, they will be happy until it no longer makes them happy. And then they will adapt to that by increasing the level of desire and the level of pleasure. In other words, the myth that you can keep pouring into the cup of pleasure and it will fill up is actually not true. It's not true. You know, this is what the Bible teaches. Solomon said this in Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 6. He said, the wind goeth toward the south and turneth about into the north, it whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. And the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. You know what he's talking about here? He's talking about the hydrologic cycle that we see on the weather all the time. And you'll see it down here. Here comes these currents coming up out of the Gulf, and they evaporate up out of the Gulf of Mexico, and they come up over the land, and they rain down, and they go into the Mississippi River, and the Mississippi River runs right back into the Gulf of Mexico. And guess what the Gulf of Mexico never does? It never gets full. I read somewhere one time that several hundred billion gallons of water flow into the Gulf of Mexico out of the Mississippi River every day. Every day. Here's the real cup of pleasure. It's full, but it's starting to drain. So you know what we do? We just pour a little more. But here's the cup of the addict. See it? You're making a mess. That's what happens. Because for you, you might already have happiness. You may have blessings in life that are really adding to your life. And they're not pleasures that God's forbidden. And sometimes those experiences, they're just an addition to the happiness we already feel. That's not what they're after. It starts out as one thing. You know why they call marijuana a gateway drug? Because I'll tell you, the first time you smoke marijuana, you experience euphoria. You have an incredible feeling. And the second time you smoke it, it's still pretty good. But after a while, just like that hedonic treadmill, your body doesn't react the same to it anymore. So the level of dopamine that might have been reacting with this drug is really not going to your brain as much, and it's not much of a thrill anymore. And so you pour faster. And you pour faster because the hole's getting bigger. And it takes more to fill you. But I'll tell you, there's not just consequences of not being filled. Because addiction fills another cup, and that's the pain cup. Loss of family, loss of credibility, guilt, shame, regret. I'll tell you, that becomes your life. That's the cup you feel. The cup of pain. And we shouldn't be surprised by this. God has warned us over and over in His Word that if you sow to the flesh, you shall of the flesh reap corruption. If you think that the desires and the pleasures that you are drawn toward in this life are going to give you happiness, what you're going to reap is pain. The Bible says good understanding giveth favor, but the way of the transgressor is hard. It makes life hard. Proverbs 5 says this, his own iniquities entrap the wicked man. He is caught in the cords of his sin. You say, Ian, why don't people that look at their situation because of their addiction just get out of it? Because they're trapped. They don't see hope. They don't see another way. And I'll tell you, the most terrible thing about addiction is once you've lived in addiction for a while, once you come out of that, you may sober up, you may get a lot of your cognitive ability back, your mind may be restored, but I'll tell you what doesn't work very good anymore is that feeling that you get when dopamine reacts with your brain. You actually destroy your body's ability to share in joyful experiences. That's why a lot of addicts will get clean, and they may go 1 or 2 years, and then they go back. It's a trap. My intent is not to judge this man's soul. I grew up with this man. On my television, that is. This man brought a lot of joy, joyful experiences, you might say, to my life. You know, a lot of people go to Hollywood seeking the types of things we've been talking about, seeking for that rush, for that fame, for the riches that go along with that. And most people don't make it. Robin Williams starred in 86 films. Did you know that? 86 films. And he won a ton of awards. This man's a winner of 7 Globes, 4 Grammy Awards, 2 Emmy Awards, and 1 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for the movie he did, Good Will Hunting. He was always laughing. Always making other people laugh. Back in the 70s and 80s, Robin Williams had a cocaine addiction. Him and another man that was a comedian named John Belushi, they were close friends. And the night before John Belushi died, they were partying together, and he said that really sobered him up, so he quit. It wasn't long before he was in alcohol addiction. He could not find the happiness he once felt. He became an addict again. And he went to rehab, and he got off alcohol. And got back on alcohol. And this was the cycle of his life. Until the day that he took a rope, and he tied it in a knot, and he put it around his neck, and he took his own life. And I'll tell you, that shocked everybody, except for his wife. It was shocking. Solomon said, therefore I hated life. I want you to let that sit in. He said, I told my heart, come. I will test you with murder. And he said, I built me vineyards, and I got me music players, and I built everything there was to build, and I obtained everything there was to obtain, and I sought to find happiness through wine, and I did all these things, and I hated my life. I hated living. And that's the truth, friends. You could have every experience that this life offers and still not be happy. Brethren, I thank you for this time today. And I hope one of these days I can give a positive talk at one of these meetings. But luckily we'll all go eat some food and feel better, and Brother Bruce will talk to us about where true happiness comes from. I hope that what we've talked about, that you'll consider it very seriously. Because growing up, I thought that would never be something that could happen to me. And I think a lot of people feel that way. That they would never get caught up in a world like the world we've described this morning. And I want to say that this doesn't make me an expert. I'm not an expert on addiction. But if there's somebody here today that's struggling with something of this nature and you want to visit, I'd be glad to visit with you about that. And I hope that you'll seek help if you're having trouble with this right now. And I hope that you've seen the path that it's taken you on. Turn the floor back over to Brother Ralph.